Can you beat Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories without ever modifying your deck? For those who don't know, Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories is a pseudo 3D action RPG on the Game Boy Advance that is also a deck-building card game. The battle system revolves around you building a solid deck of cards and playing them to initiate attacks against your foes. Initially, the game gives you a rather lackluster starting deck to use, with the intention that as you progress through the game and get new cards, you'll replace the old bad cards with these newer, stronger ones. But the question is, do you have to edit your deck at all? Or is the starting deck that you're given good enough to get you through the entire game? I think this game is very underrated, and this challenge sounds fun, so I'm making this video to test to see if it's possible. It's definitely not because I'm hopping on the video game challenge video bandwagon. No sir. We'll also be playing this on the original Game Boy Advance version of Chain of Memories, not Chain of Memories, because the GBA version is better. End of discussion. I mean, come on, the sprite work, man, they're just so pretty. Anyways, with all of that said, let's begin. As you may expect, since we're using the default deck for the entire run, the beginning of the game plays out more or less the same as it would on a casual run, so I'll take this time to go through the basics of combat for those unaware. While you can run, jump, and dodge roll anytime you want, playing cards is interesting. Only one person can be playing a card and thus perform an attack at any given time, so if two people both try to attack, a card break happens. Every card has a value tied to it, indicated by the number on the card. If two people both play cards, the higher number is the one that gets performed, while the other card is discarded. If both cards have equal value, both cards are discarded and both attacks fail. Being able to interrupt someone's attack by playing a higher valued card is called a card break, and it will stun them for a brief moment while you initiate your attack. Opponents can do this to you too though, so we really need to watch for that. Normally this system means a skilled player can equip a deck of high valued cards and make it so their opponents really can't do anything, resulting in a domination. However, with our starting deck of low valued cards, the deck is stacked against us. Literally. There is also something you can do called stocking cards, where you combine 3 cards together and play them all at once, with the total value being the combined value of all the cards. Doing this can also allow you to perform slates, which are special moves requiring specific cards to be stocked together, sometimes with specific values. We will rarely be using these in our run, since the number of slates we can use is extremely limited, and stocking cards causes you to permanently lose the first card stocked for the rest of the battle. We will sometimes use this to intentionally remove our low-valued cards from our deck, but beyond that, it isn't used much. Also, I know slate is technically pronounced sleight, as in sleight of hand, but everyone I know calls them slates, and that sounds cooler, so I'll be using that pronunciation instead. I know I'm weird. On a slightly different note, I didn't realize that the deck you use for the basics tutorial is different from the deck you're assigned afterwards. Kind of weird. So here is our starting deck. A bunch of attack cards, a blizzard, a potion, and a cure. All of the attack cards are kingdom keys, which are the weakest in terms of damage output. None of them have a value higher than 7 either, so that's an issue. These will have to be our main method of damage throughout the run. The blizzard card can shoot a short-ranged chunk of ice, which deals area damage. Stronger than the attack cards, but still not amazing. The potion card can only be used once per battle, and it will quickly reload only our attack cards for us. Pretty meh. The cure card can be used to recover a little HP during battle. Looking at this deck, I am stoked to see the 0 Kingdom Key card and the 7 valued cure card. The 0 card is super important because 0 cards will always be able to be used to instantly break any attack an opponent is using. It's super useful with dealing with enemies that are looking around dangerous slates. The cure card is also a huge relief. Healing will be crucial in this run since we'll be taking a lot of damage. The fact that it's a 7 valued cure card is a big relief too, as it means it'll be harder for enemies to break it. Ultimately, this deck is pretty bad, but I'm convinced it's good enough. Having said that, let's put it to the test. For the first several worlds, I go out of my way to fight every single enemy in the rooms, as well as intentionally creating rooms that have a decent amount of enemies. Not only will this give us the map cards that we'll need to progress through the worlds, but it's super important in order to level up quickly. Speaking of which, I should talk about the level up system now. In Chain of Memories, unlike other Kingdom Hearts games where the game gives you specific stat bonuses at given levels, you instead get your choice of one of 3 level up bonuses every time you level up. The first bonus is extra HP, the second is extra CP, or card points, which allow you to equip more in your deck, and the third bonus is learning a new slate, which can only be learned after reaching specific level up points. The second bonus is completely worthless to us since we can't edit our deck in any way by the rules of the challenge. The third bonus is also largely useless, since most of the slates we learn are either impossible to use with the default deck, or they just plain suck. So it looks like the HP bonus is the best choice, so we're putting all of our level ups toward that. Having extra health will be very valuable. Having said that, I should mention I made two mistakes with the slate bonus. First mistake is that I thought there were only going to be 3 slates that I could use that I gained from the level up bonuses: Sliding Dash, Stun Impact, and Strike Raid. However, I also failed to realize that I would technically be able to use Ars Arcanum and Ragnarok as well once I get those later down the line. I thought the latter two required attack cards of different types to be stocked together, but they don't. You can use it with just Kingdom Keys, so both of them actually can be used once they are learned, more on that later. The other mistake that I made was getting the former 3 slates early in the run. I should have just put everything into HP level ups for 2 reasons. First of all, Stun Impact and Strike Raid can't even be used with the default deck unless you create a Martial Waking Room, which are special rooms made from map cards that will boost your attack card values by 2 across the board while you're in the rooms. And then secondly, all 3 of these slates suck. They all have extremely low attack power, and once I learned Sliding Dash, there were a few times where I stocked 3 cards trying to do a simple 3-hit combo that couldn't be broken, but I ended up using Sliding Dash instead. Basically, if anyone out there attempts this challenge themselves, don't get the slate bonuses. At least not until you can learn Ars Arcanum from them. Time for the first boss, in the meanwhile, Guard Armor, in his original, superior, dark purple color scheme. Seriously, why did they change him from looking like this to looking like this? Ugh. Anyways, Guard Armor is very easy. While the combined HP of his multiple parts is pretty high, we can hit multiple of his limbs with single attacks. Most of his card values are 2s, which are very easy to break even with our lackluster deck. He does use an occasional 6, but even those aren't too bad since we have a few cards to deal with them. Donald and Goofy are going to be pretty useful in this run. While they drop randomly upon hitting enemies with attack cards, they can potentially do high damage when we summon them. Also, since friend cards are one-time use anyways, we can stock them without fear of losing our deck. Goofy does solid damage, although he has trouble hitting aerial enemies. Donald, however, is a wild card, as he casts 2 magic spells at complete random. He can do great damage, he could do basically nothing at all, he could deny you healing when you desperately need it, or potentially heal enemies by casting the wrong magic. Thankfully, Donald did great in this fight, hitting Guard Armor with multiple blizzards which helped soften up his limbs. I also got a lot of gimmick cards in this fight. A few bosses in the game have gimmick cards which can drop randomly. Gimmick cards are always valued 0, and instantly give you an advantage in the fight. For this fight, the gimmick cards made Guard Armor crumple instantly, allowing you to get 3 free hits in while he just remains there motionless. All in all, this fight was a cinch, and barely any harder than on a normal run. Immediately afterwards, we had our first fight with Axel. Axel is basically the tutorial for deck-based bosses. Most enemies in this game will just occasionally throw out cards with specific values, but deck-based bosses follow the same rules as you. They have specific decks, they can use slates, and they need to reload. They also have access to 0-valued cards, which non-deck bosses lack. Axel is really easy though. Not a whole lot of HP, low attack power, and he takes extra damage from our Blizzard card. He does have a few high-valued cards, and he can use his Firewall slate, but that's easy to break with our 0 card, and it deals a little damage even if it hits. My strategy is to stock my low-valued Kingdom Keys into my Blizzard to try and hit Axel with them while minimizing the chance he has to break it. This works pretty well, and Donald and Goofy aid me into a quick and easy victory. Next, we get our first set of world cards. This is one of the aspects of Chain of Memories that I like the most, as it gives you the freedom to choose the order you play the worlds in. While you can do that with the other Kingdom Hearts games, you can go straight to Deep Jungle in Kingdom Hearts 1, but you'll probably get your butt kicked since the enemies are strong there. But here, the enemies and bosses scale based on the order you do them in. Early worlds have weaker bosses and enemies, while later worlds have stronger ones. The main priority we have is playing worlds with tough bosses first. We will never get stronger outside of getting extra HP, but the bosses will get buffed HP and buffed attack power. Therefore, If there are any tricky fights, it's best to fight them earlier before they become a bigger pain. Each world also gives unique rewards. However, these rewards are essentially useless to us in this run, since they either amount to cards we can't equip in our deck or slates we can't use. Thus, the order we choose goes almost purely based off of dealing with the most annoying fights first. I opt to visit Olympus Coliseum first, for two reasons. First, this world has two fights that I fear could get rather nasty if I leave them for too long, and two, this is the only world in the game that gives a reward that we can actually make use of: the Blizzard Raid slate. It requires a Blizzard card and 2 attack cards to be stocked, which miraculously we have in our starting deck. Blizzard Raid is amazing since it deals disproportionately high damage for the time of the game that we get it. While we can only use it once per battle, since we only have 1 Blizzard card to stock, it makes it imprudent to use against bosses, but it will be highly useful for taking out the generic Heartless quickly and easily, making grinding levels and map cards significantly faster. The first fight we have in this world is against Cloud. Despite his notoriety among the fandom of being a difficult fight, I've never had trouble fighting him before. He's a deck fight like Axel, but a pretty easy one at this point. His HP bar is small, his attacks deal low damage, and his only slate Cross Slash is heavily telegraphed and easy to avoid. The only somewhat difficult aspect of him is that he has some decently valued cards. However, his deck is small, so he needs to reload frequently. This gives us lots of opportunities to attack him. I use a similar strategy to the Axel fight here, stock my low valued cards into Blizzard to try and dish out damage while removing bad cards from my deck. If Cloud decides to use Cross Slash, then he has to jump over to me before unleashing it, so I just run away before he swings his sword. Cloud can sometimes card break me or dodge my attacks, but this was still a really easy fight. Also, Donald got a swag finish for this fight. Good job, Donald. However, the other fight is against Hades, who is much harder than Cloud. He is also a deck-based boss, but unlike Cloud, Hades is fast, aggressive, and more dangerous. Hades has 2 different forms, Blue Hades and Angry Red Hades. Blue Hades is his default form, and this form is simple. He can really only do close-range fire shooting attacks and a single slate called Temper Flare. If Hades uses Temper Flare, he changes to his Angry Red form, where he gets faster, more aggressive, gets additional strength, speed, and range on his generic attacks, and can chuck large fireballs at us via slates. Hades also had an almost exclusively high-valued cards, making it really easy for him to card break us. Fortunately, like Axel, Hades' fire affinity means he takes extra damage from our Blizzard. The best way to tackle Hades is to primarily attack him when he's in his blue form, since he's much more passive there. I frequently use the 0 card to try and break his Temper Flare slate when it comes out to keep him in the blue phase. I can dodge his Finger Flare attack just by backing away. Hades will inevitably get Temper Flare off eventually, in which case I have to play more passively, focusing on avoiding his attacks and generally only attacking him when I can card break him into a combo. Once again, I threw away my low-valued cards into my Blizzard to try and hit Hades. Using Blizzard on its own rarely works out in this fight, since Hades can easily break it or dodge out of the way. Hades' most dangerous attack is when he shoots 2 jets of fire out of his arms. This attack will stun lock you in place and continually damage you with no way of breaking out of it once it starts. Hades can also chain this attack into itself, which can lead to some really bad situations. I did everything I could to avoid getting hit by this. Despite all of this, I still managed to beat Hades on my first try. He was definitely trickier than the previous bosses, but still not too bad once you know his attacks and how to avoid them. With Olympus Coliseum down, my next destination was Monstro the Whale, because, much like Olympus, there are 2 fights here that I was worried about leaving for too long. The first fight is the one against the Parasite Cage. This is a rather frustrating fight, even casually. The entire floor is covered in acid, which, if you touch, will continually damage you and interrupt your attacks. The only safe spots are these 4 platforms that rotate around the stage, which are annoying to jump between. As much as I like GBA Chain of Memories, the platforming is not very good. Parasite Cage himself may be completely stationary, but he's still dangerous. His 2 attacks are a close-range slam and a long-range poison blast. Both deal decent damage and are tough to avoid given the tiny platforms. He also generally only throws out high-valued cards like 7s and 8s, which makes attacking him and breaking his cards practically impossible. And he can break your cure. Thankfully, he doesn't attack very rapidly, so we try to use that to our advantage, especially when it comes to healing. My main strategy is to try to wail on him with attack cards when the platform gets close, then quickly hop to the previous platform before Parasite Cage sinks the one that we're on. Occasionally, your attacks can cause him to open his mouth and get stunned. When this happens, try to continually keep hitting him with attack cards, not just for extra damage, but also to try and get a gimmick card. For this fight, gimmick cards remove the moving platforms to create a platform that will follow you anywhere you go for around 20 seconds. Basically, it allows us to not have to worry about the acid for a bit. Our friend cards aren't the best for this fight, as again, if we touch the acid even once while they're out, they'll immediately disappear. Plus, Parasite Cage is likely to break their attack before it goes off. The fight gets tougher later on when the moving platforms shrink in size, but with diligent attacking, patience, and good platforming, we cleared the fight. The other fight I was worried about was the one at the end where we have to fight a bunch of shadows. Shadows themselves are very non-threatening, but there's a gimmick to this fight. The story behind this fight is we need to fight enough Heartless to rile up Monstro and make him sneeze. During this fight, there is a meter that we need to fill all the way to make him sneeze. If we kill a shadow, the meter increases slightly, but if we go 2 or 3 seconds without killing shadows, the meter will start to decrease. Basically, we need to kill a bunch of shadows in a short amount of time. I was dreading this fight, since I knew if the shadows were too strong with too much HP, it might be literally impossible to build the meter up before the fight was forcibly ended, given our deck does not allow much opportunity to destroy multiple shadows quickly. Having said that, I forgot just how many shadows the game throws at you, as well as how rapidly they respawn. Not only that, but since the shadows can only throw out 1-valued cards, even my stinky deck could allow me to combo them easily. The main tricky part was reloading. Our deck is small, and reloading takes time, especially once it reaches 3, giving the meter time to decrease. I did have to use my friend cards to help with this fight. Goofy did great, as his dash can hit a bunch of shadows and knock out most of their HP. Donald, however, almost screwed me over royally, since instead of casting offensive magic to keep the meter high, he chose to heal me twice when I was at essentially full HP, causing the meter to plummet. Thanks, Donald. Despite this setback, I actually still managed to scrape out a win and clear Monstro. The remaining 3 worlds I figured were all going to be really easy, as none of them have any difficult fights. I decided to go to Wonderland next. Normally I save Wonderland for last, and I was planning on doing so this time too, but then I remembered that there is the Card Soldiers fight here. Normally this fight is so easy I forget it even exists, but with a default deck, I do worry they might spam high-valued cards and tag team me. Having said that, my fears were unfounded. This fight was laughably easy, as with the Card Soldiers unable to play cards higher than a 3, and even then their attacks are weak. So yeah, easy victory. The other fight in Wonderland was Trickmaster, and as expected, he was possibly the easiest fight in the entire run. While Trickmaster can be annoying in Kingdom Hearts 1, he's an absolute joke in Chain of Memories. He basically just sits there and lets you wail away on him with attack cards. His card values are generally really low, and on the rare occasion he does get to attack, his attacks consist of either throwing a single stick to the center, or literally just walking across the stage. It's honestly not even worth elaborating on. This fight is free. Free! Between the remaining 2 worlds, I decided to take on Agrabah next, since I figured Jafar would be slightly more dangerous than Oogie Boogie, as well as the fact that there are 2 forced Heartless fights here, and there are more annoying Heartless to deal with in Agrabah than in Halloween Town. Thankfully, Agrabah gives us a big buff in the form of Aladdin, who in my opinion is the best partner in the game, as he can easily slash enemies to death, including the uber-annoying Fat Bandits. Jafar was a fight I was expecting to be 0 effort, but it proved to be more annoying than I expected. It wasn't difficult, but it was annoying. To damage Jafar, you need to attack Iago, who flies around the top of the screen carrying Jafar's lamp. The field is divided into 3 platforms, which randomly rise and fall at intervals. For some reason, I think I got very unlucky with the platforms, as they constantly left me in a spot where I could not reach Iago at all. Jafar himself has basically nothing but 7-valued cards, which are hard to break, but I remember his attacks being infrequent and having a long startup animation, so I wasn't worried about getting hit, since I knew I could reload and get a new card to break his attacks. While his Meteor Toss attack is indeed very slow, I forgot about his Laser Beam attack, which comes out faster and can be tricky to dodge. Thankfully, healing wasn't tough due to Jafar's very infrequent attack patterns. This fight wasn't tough, it just took me around 15 minutes to beat when I expected it to take no more than 5. Halloween Town was the final stop in the first Reign of Worlds, and it was the easiest by far. All of the common Heartless died easily to Blizzard Raid, and at this point, they gave me some pretty handsome EXP. My HP is getting really high now. Oogie Boogie was arguably even easier than the Trickmaster. Oogie basically can't damage you. He just throws dice, and as long as you card break them before they do anything, he literally cannot damage you. Sure, his cards are all 7s, but again, much like Jafar, I have 3 cards that can break those. Afterwards, you just hit his dice with attack cards and the gates will get lowered. Then you can reach Oogie and just wreck him with your attacks. Not only that, but hitting the dice can even give out gimmick cards to instantly lower the gates for you. Another free fight. Free! Unfortunately, this is where we encounter a massive difficulty spike, and easy fights will be few and far between from here on out. This spike starts with everyone's favorite Wendy's commercial voice actress turned evil witch, Larxene 1. Larxene is a much more difficult fight than anything we've encountered up until now. She has 2 full bars of health, significantly more than the previous bosses, and is a deck-based fight with lots of high-valued cards. She's also very fast, aggressive, and can combo you with stun lock attacks. Thankfully, her attack power is very low, and with our giant HP bar, we're still not in much danger, although I still opt to play it safe where I can. Also, one nice thing is that Larxene suffers from a bit of an AI quirk. See, Larxene doesn't really understand the pseudo 3D environment we are in. If you're directly to the left or right of Larxene, but far above or below her, she doesn't really understand that you're technically far away from her and will continually attack the empty air next to her. 2 of her generic attacks, her Claw Swipe and Knife Throw, will miss you completely. However, she can also cast Thundara, which does take effort to avoid. If you start running left or right when she casts it, you'll avoid it. But you need to run as soon as you see her raise her arms, or else you will probably get struck. Her one slate, Lightning Bolt, however, is a different story. For this slate, she'll cast Thundara, but then follow it up with a Force Lightning-esque attack, which will eat through your HP and stun you in place. As far as I know, there's no way to avoid this attack, so the only option is to use our 1-0 card to break it. For the early part of this fight, I focused on avoiding her attacks and using my 0 card to break her slate when she used it. Whenever I saw her play a low-valued card, I saw an opening and tried to combo her by card breaking. I also tried hitting her continually with my Blizzard card. It's not reliable since it has a long startup and Larxene is fast, but if you can hit her with it, it deals higher damage than your Kingdom Keys will. I used my old throw away my low-valued cards by stocking them strategy I used for Axel, and this helped out a decent bit. Ultimately, this fight wasn't super dangerous because of Larxene's low power, but it still took quite a bit of time to finish. Oh yeah, and Donald cast Thundara on Larxene, which healed her. Thanks, Donald. After sending Larxene back to Wendy's, we get our second Reign of World cards, and this is where the order of the worlds we choose will be critically important, as the game is not playing around anymore difficulty-wise. Out of the 4 worlds, I knew immediately that 100 Acre Wood is getting saved for last. This world is unique in that it's the only world with a very specific set layout and no fights at all. Just minigames. Saving it for last means we don't have to deal with a maximum power boss in this card ring, which is definitely ideal. The other worlds were a little bit trickier to figure out the order to, but I decide on Neverland first. And if you've ever played Game Boy Advance Chain of Memories, you know exactly why I'm going here first. Starting out in Neverland, I immediately notice a drastic increase in difficulty for the generic Heartless. Heartless from here on out will have larger HP bars, more powerful and annoying attacks, and much higher valued cards on average, making our starting deck really bad at defeating them. Up to this point, I have been fighting every Heartless in every room I've been in, but from here on out, I do not do so. First, I made a beeline for the Room of Beginnings so I can get Peter Pan as a friend card, as he is helpful against the Heartless here. I didn't fight a lot of Heartless in Neverland, but I did fight a few, mainly in strong initiative rooms, which speeds up the fights greatly if you get the first strike. Blizzard Raid is also still strong enough to defeat the Heartless, but this is the last world that'll be the case for. After a little fighting, I realized my max HP had pretty much hit the cap, so I decided from here on out I'd ignore all enemies I encountered, since I'll still get EXP from bosses to finish the level ups, and at this point, once our HP reaches its max level ups really won't help me anymore. I also have plenty of map cards, so I didn't even need to defeat Heartless for those. But the main reason I knew I had to take on Neverland first is because of the boss, Captain freaking Hook. Captain Hook is a challenging fight in Kingdom Hearts 1, and somewhat challenging in Chain of Memories, but Game Boy Advance Chain of Memories makes Captain Hook a horribly difficult experience. Captain Hook is a deck boss, get it, deck boss, who has lots of high-valued cards, powerful combo attacks that stun you in place, long-range bombs that eat for your HP like a hungry hippo, and insane slate combos. If that wasn't enough, the ship constantly rocks back and forth, affecting your movement and making the bombs essentially lock onto you. Captain Hook can also use an enemy card ability, giving him all zero-valued cards temporarily, which is a nightmare to deal with if he decides to use it. So yeah, this fight sucks, and I was determined to tackle it immediately before it got any more difficult. The one mercy that Captain Hook gives us is that he has a small HP bar. Well, at least compared to the other bosses at this point. The only time I can reliably deal a lot of damage to him is when he has to reload. Otherwise, I try to keep my distance from Hook to avoid his rapier attacks, and move away from his bombs that he tosses. I card break combo him when I can, but this generally results in me just eating a lot of his attacks, and taking quite a bit of damage. His two slates are hyper dangerous. Combo and Present will have Hook bum rush us with an insanely fast rapier combo, and then follows it up by tossing 3 bombs. Rush and Present has him repeatedly toss bombs one after another at you. Both slates are dangerous enough that you want your zero card on hand to break them. Rush and Present gives us a bit more time to react. As a result, anytime I used the zero card, I wanted to reload my deck to make sure I had it on hand in case he used another slate. I also used a variation on my stock low cards to get rid of them strategy, where I used these and stocked them into my cure so I could reliably heal without fear of Hook card breaking me. Peter Pan was actually quite useful here, as he appeared frequently enough that I stocked him into attack cards to damage Hook, again without a high chance of him card breaking me. Mercifully, Hook never used his all zeros enemy card, and instead opted to use his second chance card, which basically does nothing in this game. Very welcome indeed. If he had used his all zeros card, I would have just waited him out until he needed to reload. After reloading, the effect wears off, and if he uses slates when he's in this mode, any card we use will card break them. He's just not safe to approach if he does this. A combination of all of these strategies did eventually lead to a victory, but it was close at the end, as I got bodied by a Russian Present slate just beforehand. Thankfully, Hook's second reload left him open to a huge amount of damage from me, which helped finish the fight more quickly than it otherwise would have. But we can't rest just yet. Before we visit the next world, we have another boss fight. Our first of many against Riku Replica. Despite my fears, this first fight was actually surprisingly easy. Despite being a deck boss, Riku can't use slates in this fight, and his overall card values are pretty low, alongside fairly weak attacks. Since he and I had basically the same HP bars, but I can heal, this fight was significantly easier than the Hook fight. I just kind of wailed on him with attacks, healed after taking big damage, and kept my distance to reload. The only dangerous thing about Riku here is his dash attack has 2 hitboxes, and if you get hit by the second hitbox, you'll get stunned. Thankfully, you can just do the same thing as Larxene and stay away from him on the Z-axis, and he'll be forced to chase you down, giving you time to dodge roll past or have him just attack nothing, as Riku will frequently make an attack dash towards you even if you're far away from him on the Z-axis. All in all, a very easy fight, despite my worries. Next, I ventured out to everyone's favorite Smash Ultimate stage, Hollow Bastion. This world also worried me with what lay in store. To start, the Heartless in this world are so strong and annoying that they are not worth fighting. Except for the Shadows, all of them can easily spam high-valued cards that we really can't card break, especially the Wizards and Defenders. The Wyverns are also at their most dangerous in GBA Chain of Memories, as their Flutter Kick will combo you in place, leaving you unable to stop it. The Wizards also recover HP from all magic attacks, including Blizzard Raid, adding to the frustration. The Defenders are the worst lot by far. I haven't really touched on this, but any enemy who takes no damage from frontal attacks are a nightmare to deal with in the Game Boy Advance version. Unlike in other versions, you can't hit them in the side or in the head. only in the back, and they can turn around instantly, making getting hits on them an exercise in frustration. They also have large HP bars and can use 9 valued cards. Oh, and their shields even guard them from most magic attacks. Suffice to say, I avoided fighting enemies in this world. I fought one group just to see how bad it was. It was bad. The real danger that we have to face is the boss, Dragon Maleficent, who is easily the most difficult non-deck boss in the game. Her primary difficulty is that she only has one weak point, her head, and her head is a shockingly small target requiring fairly precise jumps to reach. But the main issue here is that she can instantly snap her head to a different location in one frame. She also tends to constantly do this when you start attacking, making getting a single full combo on her a fool's errand. While she can't use slates, her attack card values are pretty high across the board, meaning she is quite likely to card break you. She also has a lot of HP, and her attacks can be fairly scary. Maleficent has 4 main attacks she can do. First is her bite attack. It comes out extremely quickly, so if she card breaks you into this, you are getting hit. Thankfully, it deals relatively small damage. Second is her head scrape attack, where she moves her head from left to right. Not particularly dangerous. Third is her green fire attack, which is the move you actually want her to use, as the flames are generally out of the way, and you can hit them with attack cards in order for them to drop friend cards and potentially even gimmick cards, which, if you use them, will create a small tower for you to more easily reach her head. Her final and worst attack is her ground pound attack, where she creates 2 shockwaves by slamming the ground. This attack deals major damage and will destroy your gimmick towers. Most of this fight was spent me just trying to hit her head with attack cards while trying to pick up friend and gimmick cards. While the friends didn't do much at all, they did allow me to stock cards to safely heal and attack without fear of her ever card breaking us. I also noticed Maleficent's attacks seemed connected to your distance to her. If you were far away, that's when she seemed to use her shockwave pound, whereas if I got a little bit closer, she could use the fire, and closer than that, her head scrape and bite. Reloading was tricky, since unless I had a gimmick platform, she'd generally just spam shockwave when I tried to reload. Another trick that I attempted was when her head was up high, I tried to hit it with attacks to make her lower it and then try to hit her with my Blizzard card, because that does do at least a decent bit of damage, considering we can't really full combo her. Maleficent got me to pretty low HP, especially since healing was often interrupted by her attacks, but I did manage to just barely finish her off. We then get thrust into the second fight with Riku Replica. Unlike the first fight, he now can use a slate, Dark Firaga. Unluckily for Riku, this slate is laughably easy to avoid. Just stay above or below him, and if he fires the slate, you can just run behind him and the fireball will go in completely the opposite direction, missing everything. Even if he fires it directly at you, you can still dodge roll right through it anyways, so we really don't even need to worry about using our zero card to break it here. Really, the only danger this poses is if he card breaks you with it, as that will likely result in you getting hit. So my strategy was to just not play cards when I saw he had a Dark Firaga ready to go, and wait for him to use it before attacking again. Other than this one addition, the fight is very similar to the first fight, and it just requires patience, and he'll go down pretty easily. With Riku Replica dispatched again, we're off to... oh no. Yeah, I hate Atlantica, but thankfully this is probably the game where it's the least bad, and for this run it's actually quite simple. We just beeline it right to the boss. Ursula, who is the boss, is a much simpler fight than the previous 2 Disney bosses. She's a non-deck boss like Maleficent, but way less dangerous. For the most part, Ursula is content to just sit there and let you attack her. All we have to do is take out one of her tentacles and then we can attack her face. I also learned something new in this battle that I didn't know before. I didn't realize you could jump on her shoulders to help you hit her face once one of her tentacles was down. I thought that maybe I could use this to have Ariel actually hit Ursula to damage her, but no, Ariel was just completely useless. Like usual. Gimmick cards were also quite useful in this fight, as they made Ursula immediately fall to the ground as if we had just killed all of her tentacles at once. Ursula really only has 3 attacks, an extremely weak tentacle flip, her bolt breath, which can be broken, or we can just run to the opposite side of her face to avoid it entirely, and a bubble attack, which we can pretty easily break with our zero card. The latter 2 attacks have a lot of starting lag, so this gives us time to find a zero if we need one, even if it requires a reload. All in all, a very simple fight with nothing really dangerous here. Just one world left in this reign, and it's everyone's favorite world, the 100 Acre Wood.
You are made of stupid.
Okay, well at least I like Winnie the Pooh, even if no one else does. Although, even I admit that 100 Acre Wood kind of sucks in Game Boy Advance Chain of Memories. Actually, it just kind of sucks in Chain of Memories in general. Sora meets Pooh and immediately agrees to help Pooh look for his friends. Unfortunately, he's in Castle Oblivion, which causes him to forget things, so he immediately forgets his promise to Pooh and just ditches him to escape as fast as possible. Whoops. The next fight was one I was dreading going into this run. Vexen. Vexen is really annoying because of the shield he uses. Normally this isn't a problem since you can just spam the Fire Raid slate, which will break through it, but with only attack cards, we have to strike him in the back. And you know how hard that is to do in Game Boy Advance Chain of Memories. One of my first moves was to instantly throw away my Blizzard card, since that will heal Vexen if it hits him. And I obviously don't want to heal him any more than possible, so if I remove it, it'll just make my reloads a bit faster. Although, I learned the hard way that the game will force you to aim for the enemy if you stock a magic spell, and I accidentally healed him immediately.
You imbecile!
Vexen actually wasn't as bad as I anticipated. For one, he's surprisingly passive in this fight, mostly just hovering in a zigzag pattern across the stage and only occasionally using an attack. He only has one slate, Freeze, and it's extremely easy to avoid. You literally just dodge roll at the right time and you'll avoid it entirely. Heck, you might even be able to avoid this by jumping or even just running. I truly don't know. I think I've been able to dodge it with a jump or even just running before, but I'm not sure if it's consistent. So I just opted to dodge roll since the timing is really easy and it's 100% reliable. His generic attacks really aren't any better either. He only has slow blizzard spells that can also be dodge rolled through, and he has a very weak shield swipe. While the fight took a while, it wasn't hard, especially with the cure card on my side. However, after this fight, we have to go to the next world, Twilight Town, and immediately rematch him. And this was the version of the fight that I was worried about. Vexen is much more aggressive in this fight. Although his blizzards are still really easy to avoid, his shield swipe is a bit more problematic, as it comes out fast, so he can easily card break us into this attack and we won't be able to stop it. Vexen has high valued cards, so this will always be a bit of a risk. I need to be diligent to heal my HP when it drops below half just to be safe. What I was more worried about though was that Vexen gets 2 new slates in this fight. The first one, Iceburn, is even less threatening than his Freeze slate, as all it does is create a couple of ice spots on the floor, and if you touch them, you trip for a second. That's it. He can't even overwhelm the field with these because every time he uses the slate, it removes the previous ice patches before it creates new ones. So all we have to do is avoid the small parts of the arena with the ice patches, and it's not a problem even slightly. However, his other new slate, Ice Needles, is much more dangerous, as he'll shoot icicles out of the floor and they'll chase you down. These can hurt a lot if they hit us, so we need to use our Zero card to break this slate. In order to combat this, it's time to talk about a key strategy that I've used a tiny bit before now, mainly for Captain Hook, and will implement heavily throughout the rest of the run: preloading the deck. Here's how it works. In order to reload your deck, you need to charge your reload card until the counter reaches 0. Each time you reload, the counter will increase by 1 until it reaches 3, where it stays for the rest of the battle. Preloading the deck is charging the reload card until it's just barely away from reaching 0, then switching over to attacking and defending. This way, if we need to reload in an emergency, we can instantly reload since we've already charged. Where this is really useful is when we're facing a foe that has at least one dangerous slate. If they use the slate, we can use our Zero card to break it if we save it. But what if they use the same slate again right afterwards? Then we're completely defenseless. However, if we preload the deck, we can break their slate, reload, and then break a slate again if they try it, since we'll have our Zero card back. If they use 3 dangerous slates in a row, this time we really can't do anything. But that hardly ever happens, so this strategy is really useful. It's also useful for double healing in dangerous situations. Basically, we'll be preloading our deck immediately whenever we can going forward, unless I otherwise specify. My strategy was to use this strat to break his Ice Needle slate whenever he tried it, while hitting him with attack cards when I saw an opening, stopping to heal when necessary. This is also the fight where I noticed something very weird about deck-based boss AI. I had heard about this before, but this was my first time personally experiencing it. Basically, because deck-based bosses have a finite amount of cards and they lose the first card they use in slates, the more slates they use, the smaller their deck gets. Eventually, when they keep using slates, they'll hit a threshold where their AI will prevent them from using any more due to their deck now having few cards. This is what I'll refer to as slateless mode. Once an AI reaches slateless mode, not only will they stop using slates, but they'll also start reloading their deck way more frequently, even if they have cards to use. The AI will basically cycle through their deck looking for cards that they want to play, and if they can't find any they want to play, they'll reload their deck. This can lead to situations where the AI literally reloads their deck twice in a row without playing any cards. Keep in mind, bosses can have item cards to reload the cards they lost in slates, which can extend their slate state. Ideally, try to break these item cards when they use them, or the fight will just take longer. Amusingly, Vexen opened the fight by immediately using a Mega Ether, which literally did nothing. Also, I want to point out that Donald tried firing a Blizzaga spell at Vexen during this fight, which would have fully healed him if it had hit. But Vexen, seemingly disgusted by Donald's treachery, broke the Blizzaga with a card break just in time.
You imbecile!
Thanks, Donald. Once Vexen reaches the slateless mode, the fight is just a grind of attacking him while healing from his shield swipe when necessary, and ultimately, he went down much more easily than I had feared. Next, we had the third fight against Riku Replica. But as far as I can tell, this fight was identical to the second fight. The only differences are like maybe his cards were slightly higher value on average, and maybe he deals a little more damage with his attacks. But honestly, my strategy was identical to the second fight with him, and I didn't notice it being any more difficult. Story-wise, Sora has been forgetting things every floor he reaches in the castle, and when Donald and Goofy become suspicious of what's going on, Sora ditches them, so we now have no friend cards going forward. The reason for this is because this is the floor where Sora forgets his manners. That's seriously one of my proudest jokes. Please appreciate it. Now we're off to Destiny Islands, the penultimate world, and in this world, I made two mistakes. First, I used my final 2 valued map card, not realizing that I would need one to open the Room of Beginnings here. This wasn't a big deal, as I just opted to reset the game to save my 2 this time. I saved just before Destiny Islands, so no big deal. The second error I mistook the Room of Rewards for the Room of Guidance. By the time I realized my mistake, I had already used a lot of map cards on the criteria for this crown door. I was farther in the world and really didn't feel like resetting again, so I just moved on with fewer map cards than I otherwise would have had. There's only one fight in Destiny Islands, Darkside. Darkside sucks as a boss. Not because he's difficult, challenging, or unfair, but because he is so boring. This guy has an absurd amount of HP, 3.5 bars, second only to the final boss, and no one we've fought up to this point has had more than 2 bars of health. But, like in every game, Darkside is all bark and no bite. He's extremely easy, but he takes forever because of his high HP. Darkside is a very pattern-based boss. He cycles through his 4 moves in this order. First, he launches energy balls from his chest. Next, he slams the ground with his fist. Next, he fires energy balls from his hands, and then finally, he slams his fist into the ground, creating a portal of darkness underneath it. Anytime he does one of his fist slam attacks, he is open to being damaged, whereas if he launches energy balls, all you have to do is card break his attack to make him go to his next fist slam. It took around 20 minutes to beat him, but I did beat him without taking damage more than a few times. Very, very bad fight, but not difficult. However, that is the last simple fight in the entire game, as we now have to face one of the most infamous fights in the entire game, Riku Replica 4. If you've played this game before, you probably got stuck on this fight, because Riku Replica ain't messing around no more. He gets several massive buffs in this fight. First, he has an additional bar of HP now, making the fight even longer. Second, his card values are almost exclusively 7s, 8s, and 9s, making him much more difficult to deal with given our terrible deck. He can card break us easily, and it's going to be almost impossible for us to interrupt his attacks with our own card breaks. Finally, he gets a new slate in this fight. the dreaded Dark Aura. While Dark Firaga is really easy to avoid, there is no avoiding Dark Aura. He will slash you several times and melt your HP bar like butter in a volcano. The only option to counter Dark Aura is to use the Zero card we have. This means the preloading strategy is essential here to avoid getting murdered, because Dark Riku absolutely loves spamming Dark Aura constantly. The first part of this fight is literally just avoiding him and breaking his Dark Auras in order to send him into Slateless mode as soon as possible. He also does have a few elixirs, so we do our best to break those to speed the fight up. I did not succeed at breaking all of them. Avoiding his attacks with our basic movements is quite important, since this is the point where he can easily stun lock you with his dash attacks, and his damage is buffed too, allowing him to quickly deplete your health if you don't know how to bait his attacks safely. Again, do this by staying away from him on the Z-axis as much as possible, and dodge rolling past him when he gets too close. Once he reaches Slateless mode, things actually don't get much easier for us. While we're safe from Dark Aura, it's still risky to approach Riku at all due to his overwhelming aggressiveness and high card values. The only truly safe time to approach him is when he's reloading his deck. And when I say that, I mean when he's finished charging up his reload and his deck is shuffling back. If you attack him while he's charging, he can stop charging and immediately switch back to attacking. Even if you're super careful, I don't think there's any way to avoid taking damage completely, so we still have to heal whenever we can. The best time to do this is either while he's reloading, or if you can card break him with the Cure card. Thankfully, Slateless Riku will shuffle frequently, and his remaining deck happened to have a couple of low-valued cards in it, so despite me approaching him even though he can retaliate, the fight was still cleared on my first try. As soon as the fight ended, I immediately saved, because I know right after this, we have an even tougher fight, Larxene 2. Fortunately, Donald and Goofy forgot that we canceled our friendship, so they're willing to help us again. I'll be sure to thank Naminé later. Super promise. Anyways, Larxene is much nastier than the first time we fought her. Like Riku Replica 4, she now has an additional health bar and higher valued cards overall. However, she also has a new slate, Teleport Rush, in which she repeatedly teleport frags us while comboing us with her knife swipes. Each swipe is weak, but combined they'll eat through your HP like a starving man at the Golden Corral. Oh, yeah, and she attacks relentlessly this time. If you thought she threw out cards quickly last time, this time she pretty much never stops throwing them out, making our Z-axis strategy crucial for survival this time. Starting out, I used the preloading strategy to exhaust her slates, which was even harder than for Riku since both of her slates needed to be broken with a 0, and they both come out faster than Dark Aura, giving us little time to react. This also means if she slate spams, you will get hit. A lot of damage happened during this part because of this. To make matters worse, she successfully used her elixirs to reload her slates, so this took a lot longer than it should have. If there's one positive thing to be said about this fight though, it's that because Larxene spams her attacks quickly, it means she goes through her deck quickly and thus has to reload a lot, giving us more opportunities to attack safely. We can also use these openings to heal us with our Cure card. Similarly to Riku Replica, we want to unleash our attacks on Larxene just after she finishes charging her reload. This is fairly precise, since attacking too soon can get you whacked, but too late and she can fly away from you, causing you to miss with your attacks. Also, one weird thing that happened during this fight is once Larxene entered Slateless mode, she stopped casting Thundara altogether, despite her having magic cards. I'm not sure if this is a glitch, an unintended side effect, or intentional, but it was kind of weird. Once again, with a lot of patience and skill, Larxene goes down, and surprisingly, without her getting us close to death. With Larxene down, we now stand at the gates of the final world, Castle Oblivion. Everything ends here, no turning back. It's time to finish everything. But first, we head back to Traverse Town to grind up some map cards. Somehow, I lost a huge amount of my map cards. I have no idea how that happened. With our hand overflowing with simple map cards, we head to the final world. I just want to point out how tough the generic Heartless are in this place. They all have high HP, high valued cards, and dish out heavy damage. It's a good thing we can grind map cards in easy worlds because I do not want to deal with Neo Shadows in this run. But we can't relax because once we reach the Room of Beginnings, the absolute toughest challenge in the whole run begins. No, I'm not talking about the fight against Axel. I'm talking about the door that requires a blue 1 map card to open it. I genuinely forgot about this requirement, and somewhere along the journey, I must have used my last blue 1 map card, not thinking I'd need it later. No problem, I thought. I can just reset, head back to an earlier floor, and fight a couple of enemies until I get a blue 1 map card. I decided to head to Olympus Coliseum rather than Traverse Town, since I knew only certain floors had specific map cards available, and Olympus would give me 3 possible blue cards as opposed to 1. In Traverse Town, you can only get Moments Reprieves, but in Olympus, or whatever you happen to use for the second floor, you can get Moments Reprieves, Moogle Rooms, and Calm Bounties, all of which will help me out. Now, I just want to ask you humble viewers this question. How long do you think it would take to get a blue, 1-valued map card? The answer? 4 hours! I kid you not, it took 4 hours of grinding before I was given a blue 1 map card. I don't know how unlucky I had to be to get this, but I will mention I got tons of Bouncy Wild, Blue Rhapsody, and Shadow cards, which are supposed to be rare enemy card drops. I got like 7 to 9 of each of them, but not one single 1-valued blue map card. I was sorely tempted to just use a Game Shark code to give me infinite map cards so I could open that dang door and continue the run. I mean, no one would know since I could just avoid talking about it in this video, but my conscience wouldn't allow it. This single card took me more time to get than all of the bosses combined. Well, almost. Anyways, with a blue 1 card in hand, we can finally open the door and take on the boss I was dreading the most in this challenge, Axel 2. I was dreading this fight because I consider this fight to be the toughest in the game from a casual standpoint. The first time, Axel was a tutorial, but no more. Axel not only has free full bars of HP, but he hits much harder than any boss we've seen previously, especially if he hits us with a slate. Not only is his Firewall slate powered up, but he has a new slate, Firetooth, which is even worse. While he's not as agile as Larxene is, Axel is still very teleport happy, both to try and get the jump on you, and for avoiding your attacks. Thankfully, Axel does still retain his weakness to ice, so if we can hit him with our Blizzard card, we can deal some good damage. Of course, that's a significant if, as Axel almost always teleports away if you try Blizzarding him. One other saving grace is Axel only has 2 generic attacks, and they're both pretty manageable to avoid. His Chakram Slash requires him to be close to you, so as long as you keep away from Axel, it's no threat. Of course, if he card breaks you when you're attacking him, or if he teleports next to you and uses this, it'll dish out a lot of damage. His Chakram Toss has range, but it gives us ample time to react to it and avoid it. This one really isn't threatening unless you're right next to him when he uses it. Also, this will cause Axel to teleport to where the Chakram gets tossed, so make sure you keep away lest he combos you. Otherwise, we use the same preloading strategy as we've been using before, taking time to heal when Axel reloads his deck. As for his slates, they're both extremely powerful, so we need to avoid getting hit by them. 0 cards are the safest way of dealing with them, but Firewall can be avoided if you're close enough to Axel that when he uses it, you can dash behind it, it's where it spawns, and make it disappear before it can hit us. Firetooth, however, cannot be avoided, so we need to use a 0. Thankfully, we do have some time to react to it before it becomes a problem. However, if we get hit by it, we may be reunited with our dearly departed grandpa earlier than expected. With this strategy, we can pretty safely deal with Axel bit by bit. He'll definitely deal some damage, but we can heal well enough by waiting for his reloads. We can also get some attacks in then too. Fortunately, Axel wasn't able to reload his slates, as the first thing he did in this fight was blow his first elixir, and I broke his second elixir with my cure, which sped up the fight tremendously. I was really surprised at just how often Axel reloaded his deck once he was in slateless mode. He would frequently reload after playing only 1 or 2 cards, making my life really easy. I also realized that if I waited until Axel started reloading and then used Ars Arcanum, it'd be much more effective since he couldn't break it as quickly. This led to a lot more damage than Larxene took from the same slate. I did try using Ars Arcanum against Larxene, but I often did that just as a way of card breaking her, and it would just result in her immediately countering and it really not doing anything. So I didn't think of bringing it up when I talked about that fight, but it worked a lot better for Axel. I also ended up accidentally using Ragnarok 2 when I tried to use Ars Arcanum. I guess the card value was just a little too high. It almost hit, but unfortunately Axel teleported out of the way of the laser at the last possible second. That was a real shame. Goofy ended up being quite a star in this fight, as I was able to unleash an epic Goofy tornado to deal lots of damage. Axel wasn't able to break it. Also, I finished the fight with Blizzard Raid for the swag. Thus, what I anticipated as the toughest fight in the game was surprisingly manageable, and easier to deal with than the door leading to him! With just a few more rooms to go through and no more crown doors to take down, we arrive at the final boss. Now, I want to point out something. Up to this point, this has actually been a deathless run. There hasn't been a single fight that I've had to restart for any reason, which really surprised me. That is all about to go out the window, because this next fight is bar none the most difficult in the run. The final boss and the least intimidating Grim Reaper wannabe ever made, Marluxia. Despite his feminine looks and rose petal motif, Marluxia pulls no punches in battle, as he carries a giant scythe that hits as hard as you'd expect a giant scythe to hit, even though it's pink. To start, Marluxia has 4 bars of HP, more than anyone else in the game in Sora's story. This fight is going to take a long time. Marluxia is also very powerful and unbelievably aggressive. He has 2 slates up his sleeve, Blossom Shower and Death Scythe. Both of these are quite theatrical. Blossom Shower causes him to flood the screen with spinning flower petals, while Death Scythe has him charge up and slash you with his scythe from anywhere on screen. Marluxia has a gigantic deck and will spam these slates constantly. He will be using both of these slates like crazy, not just because of his deck size, but also because he has several elixirs to reload them, and an enemy card ability that lets him use his slates twice when he builds them. This is a perfect recipe for disaster since we only have 1 0 card, and there is no way we can reload that to match his slate pace. But, in a very weird twist of fate, Marluxia's slates are actually the least dangerous part of the fight. Both of his slates, despite the theatrics, are actually pretty easy to avoid. All they require is a decently timed dodge roll and you will avoid all damage. It might take some practice, but once you get the timing down, it becomes pretty easy to avoid them consistently. The problem is not the slates. The problem is Marluxia's generic attacks. These are crazy dangerous. First, if Marluxia uses a magic card, which are the ones with the blue outlines, he'll strike the ground with his scythe and create a powerful shockwave. If you stay out of the shockwave circle, you'll avoid taking damage. The move will have a much larger hitbox behind Marluxia than in front of him, so try not to be behind him when this move goes off. If he uses an attack card, the ones with the red outlines, he can do one of 2 attacks. The first of these will have Marluxia swing his scythe and fire a pink projectile from it. He'll do this attack if you're a decent distance away from him, or if you're right next to him. If you're right next to him, you're probably getting hit by this, either by the scythe or the pink projectile. If you're far away, you can either dodge roll, move up or down, or jump over the projectile if you're far enough away. But if you're too close, you won't actually have enough height to get over the projectile. However, the second attack he can do is by far the most unfair attack in the entire game, his Scythe Dash. He'll generally do this attack if you're close to him, but not right next to him. This attack is the worst, and the primary reason Marluxia is so dangerous. This attack will have him dash forward, swinging his scythe into the ground. This move is absurdly powerful, taking out around 1/8 of your maximum health, which is crazy if you remember how big our HP bar is. It deals more damage than you'll heal back with a cure. Not only that, this attack has an unfairly huge hitbox. If you are anywhere near Marluxia during any part of the dash, it will hit you, no matter what the graphics themselves say. While you can avoid taking damage by perfectly timing a dodge roll just as Marluxia performs the dash, this is extremely difficult to do. See, the most unfair thing about this move is just how fast this move is. It comes out near instantaneously, and you absolutely will not have enough time to react to it and perform the dodge roll. You don't even have time to react to card break it. The only way to avoid this attack is to guess when he'll use it and dodge roll before he even plays the card. No joke. That is how stupid and dangerous this move is. It does not help that dodge rolling in this game is really annoying due to the controls. Having said that, it is possible. This is where Marluxia's extreme aggressiveness comes in handy. Marluxia is programmed to always attack you if he can, provided you're facing him and somewhat close by. Remember that your distance from him determines which attack he'll do. If you space yourself correctly, you can actually manipulate him to do the dash at the right time and dodge roll accordingly. Of course, this isn't 100% guaranteed, as there are two things that can go wrong. One is that Marluxia plays a magic card instead and does his Scythe Slam. If this happens, you'll end up dodge rolling right into the shockwave he creates. And might I mention, this attack deals a lot of damage too. This is where it is very important to pay attention to the color card he has in his hand. Even so though, he can always just cycle to a magic card and play it immediately, so there's always a chance that this can happen, although it is decently uncommon. The other problem is if Marluxia decides to randomly delay playing his attack card. This can happen around 5% of the time, and it's extremely frustrating when he does, since he'll dodge roll early and then he'll just turn around and dash into you, hitting you like a truck. No matter what I did, there was always a danger of him hitting me, which makes this fight very, very difficult. And this is where my deathless run came to an end.
I can't go on.
Many times.
Can't go on. Can't go on. Can't go on.
The worst part of this fight is just how long it takes to get Marluxia into slateless mode, due to his aforementioned massive slate supply. Deaths here can result in around 15 to 20 minutes being lost. Curing isn't free in this fight either, due to how easily Marluxia can break your cure card. The only time you can consistently heal is when Marluxia is reloading. Eventually, I realized that combos were just not viable against Marluxia. No matter how many times I tried to combo him, it would always result in him just countering me and hitting me for damage before I could get the finisher off, which was not a fair trade since he deals way more damage to us than we deal to him, and he has twice our health. Eventually, I'd realized that my attacks on him would have to consist of me throwing out a single attack card on him, following by either dodge rolling if I thought he was going to retaliate, or running away. That made the fight even slower. Also, you can't even attack Marluxia safely during his reload, since, again, attacking him while he's charging can lead to a retaliation, and after he fully charged, he constantly moves away from you at a brisk pace until he can attack again. It is possible to intercept him and attack him while his cards are cycling back, but it's quite tricky. Overall, my strategy for this fight was to first get him into slateless mode by dodge rolling his slates. Anytime my HP fell below half, I would wait for an opportunity to cure and keep reloading and curing until I had blue HP again, playing on the defensive meanwhile. Then I'd attack if I saw an opening, either trying to intercept him while his cards cycled back in a reload, or hitting him in the back when he was performing an attack and immediately ducking away. This is where I really tried to bait out his dash attack, because if I could predict when he would dash attack, I could dodge roll through him and then turn around and attack him when he had his back turned. This was really one of the only areas where it was somewhat safe to attack him. This fight alone took me around an hour and a half to beat, but in the end, I emerged victorious. With Marluxia's first form done, all that was left was his final form, which I wasn't worried about at all. Marluxia's final form, despite its appearance and massive health bar, is very easy to beat since he's a non-deck boss. No slates, and no zeros. So as long as you know what you're doing, this fight is very simple, even in a default deck run. Sure, the fight takes a long time, but you can heal pretty much unchallenged, and the only real danger is if Marluxia attacks while you have to reload. This means it's best to card break him just before you reload. Otherwise, once you know his attack patterns, you can beat this fight very easily. It just takes a long time. For his first part, you have to destroy his giant scythes, which have around 1.5 bars of HP each. As for his attacks, he has the Blossom Shower attack, which can be dodge rolled in the same way that he did in his first form. He can move to the opposite side of the screen and slash, which you just need to keep your distance to. He can summon Rose Petal guns on screen, which I recommend killing all but one. If there's just one, his attacks amount to just the petal shooting a single bullet, which is is pretty easy to avoid. Despite their HP bars, you can insta-kill them just by card breaking them. Finally, he can also blast you with lasers from his gunship. You need to card break this attack unless you want to take a lot of damage. With his scythes gone, you then have to just take him out, and he has another 4 bars of HP. He also hovers high up, making attacking him more than a bit annoying. He can still fire the rose petal guns, but now he gets some new moves. One of these is a move where he'll move up above you and perform a series of attacks where he'll try to slam you. This can be dangerous, as the only safe way of avoiding damage is card breaks, and you don't have a whole lot of time to react. The move you want him to do is his dash attack, where if you card break it, you can jump onto his ship and attack him much more easily. Unfortunately, you'll also be constantly getting pushed away from him while you're up here, and the wind gets stronger the longer you stay up. It's even worse if the petal guns are out too. However, this is your best opportunity for damage. With all of this in mind, this fight really is just about healing diligently when you take damage and slowly but surely whittling his health down to 0, and eventually, you'll succeed. With Marluxia defeated, I can conclude that it is indeed possible to beat Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories without ever changing your deck. And unlike Sora, that's something I won't be forgetting. Thanks for watching. I know this was a dramatically different video than the kind I usually make. This was the first time I played through the whole game and uploaded highlights in one single video, and it's the first video I made where I actually wrote a script for it in advance. Let me know what you thought, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future. God bless everyone.